I also calculated the cop kill rate against citizens, and it's actually tremendous. So if you calculate, it's around 150 deaths for every 100,000 cops per year. If you compare that to private individual kill rates in the United States, it's like 30 times lower. So it's really unfortunate the amount of people who get killed in the United States by cops. So the idea that they're there to protect people, that's something we can question.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have a great guest coming in, Edward Stringham. He's the Davis Professor of Economic Organizations and Innovation at Trinity College. He also has worked with Walter Block even 20 years ago. He's a current professor, and he's also, as he wrote to me, he's a fellow 20 Hottest Libertarian Men award winner. I think he was lower on the list than me. And he actually just came out with a new book, which looks really great, called Private Governance, Creating Order in Economic and Social Life. And that's been a big topic that we've had on in the past, is private governance. Of course, we've had on Suzanne Tarkowski-Tempelhoff a few times with BitNation. BitNation looks like it's really taking off now. Some of our next guests are actually going to be involved in talking about private governance as well. So this has become a very interesting and topical issue. So we're going to get into all of that. But Edward, before we get started, I got to ask you, how did you become an anarchist?
Oh, thanks. It's really nice to have you here, and I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you. So I've always been kind of into free markets and the idea that businesses can help people. And I was actually not really thinking about it too systematically before college. But when I started taking classes with Professor Walter Block, my favorite undergraduate professor, he would go through example after example and say, you know, one of the great things about markets is the producer has to serve the customer. He would then contrast with government and talk about how monopoly doesn't help people. But he didn't really extend the logic to what I was fully expecting. And so he would say he actually did not present the full case. And he would say, well, you know, a government should just do certain things like police and courts and military. And I was just thinking about that. In my college, we used to have, everybody would go to these parties, underage drinking would occur, and the cops would raid them, and they were always spoiling everybody's fun. And I was thinking, well, you know, this kind of sounds very similar to what Professor Block is talking about in class, where the government is not there to make sure people are happy, especially harassing 20-year-old kids. We're just having
the government is definitely not there to make sure you are happy. That's definitely not one of the things the government does.
So we needed to fight for our right to party.
Here they come now. I can hear the cops coming
out. They're right outside my window, hearing me say that. And so I was just really thinking, well, you know, they don't act in the same way that, for example, the on-campus security at my college, where it's a private college, they were very friendly. But the minute you step off campus, the police are quite maybe a little bit less friendly. So at one point I went into Professor Block's office. He asked us what we wanted to write our papers on, and I said to him, I'm thinking about writing about the following topic, and I wanted to run it by you. My topic is going to be called Why Libertarians Are Communists. And he's like, what? And he said, what do you mean by that? And I think I might have even said, why libertarians are commies. He said, what are you talking about? And then I said, well, you're always talking about how the private sector, the voluntary sector, is always so much better than the coercive government sector, and why should we make exceptions to that for things like police and courts? And he said, he looked around and he said, step into my office. And he basically told me that there's two types of libertarians. There's some who believe in government monopoly over police and courts, and there's others who don't. So just started reading about it then, and it's been a great set of interesting research since to see how common this is. It's not just a science fiction idea. It's like actually very common to see private security, private rules and regulations everywhere in the world today. Even with governments, we see private rules and regulations. And to think it's not so far-fetched after all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, it's all happening. And one of our next guests, and I'm so glad to get him on, is Dale Brown of Threat Management, which is a private security firm, essentially private police in Detroit that's expanding all over the place now. And I was so thrilled because I've been following them for years because I was like, this is what we need more of. We need private policing, private security. And they do an amazing job. And but I was so worried he wasn't an anarchist because I just saw him on his interviews and stuff. And he didn't talk about any philosophy, about political philosophy or anything, but he just sort of came across as probably being one of those sort of maybe libertarian, maybe sort of a constitutionalist Republican sort of type. And I contacted him recently, and I said I kind of sheepishly, because I really respect the guy a lot. I love what he's doing, and I kind of sheepishly just sort of asked, "Are you an anarchist?" Or and he didn't respond right away. It was on Facebook messaging. And I said, I just want to ask if you believe you should have a ruler, a violent ruler, I said. And he wrote back, he said, not only do I not believe I should have a violent ruler, I don't want any rulers. And I went, oh, good, you're good. So he's going to be on Anarchast next. So that's going to be excellent, talking about private policing. Before we get into that, because I want to get more into that, it's also interesting that you're pretty much, one of your professors was the great Walter Block, Mr. Libertarian himself.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's, I wonder how many of his other students turned into anarchists.
Pretty good number, actually. There were 3 of us who went on to get our PhDs and are now professors now. So I know in that cohort, this was at College of the Holy Cross, we had some friends who've since gone on to become academics writing about a lot of these topics. And I know he's done very well after he was at College of the Holy Cross, producing students at his current university, Loyola University New Orleans, and I know a ton of his students are now professors writing about this. So people like Emily Scarbeck, Nick Snow, Daniel D'Amico, there's just tons of great people out there who are into these ideas because of the influence of a professor like Walter Block.
Yeah, that's great. I just saw Walter, of course, here at Anarchapulco just a few weeks ago, and I've met him many times. Greg, amazing person, and what luck for you to have him as a professor.
He's so funny and so kind and generous with his time. I'm grateful to be able to interact with a professor like that who can really change somebody's life in a very nice way, supportive way, and I'll always remember that.
Yeah, I love too that you sort of brought up, you said that, hey, maybe we don't need the government to do policing and courts, and he's like, let's go into my office to talk about this. Just got to keep this a little quiet because this isn't totally normally said.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it had anything to do with him being less established, but he got into College of the Holy Cross relatively late in his career, so he actually was not tenured, and he unfortunately they didn't give him tenure at College of the Holy Cross, so he left the same year that I left, and since then I think that I don't know, maybe he's a little bit more outright about these things in his current classes, but I can always give him a hard time for that one.
Police in the U.S. kill at a rate 30x higher than non-police. Police in the United States kill at a rate 30 times higher than non-police. That statement, made by economist Edward Stringham during his conversation with Innercast host Jeff Berwick, is telling. Perhaps it's not too fantastical for readers of COPBLOCK.org, who are intimately familiar with endless examples of police employee aggression. And maybe it's not even too surprising for others who are starting to see through the thin blue line propaganda. But for those who still unthinkingly parrot the mantra that a stranger with a badge is automatically a hero, it should be a wake-up call. Edward Stringham, and I also calculated the cop kill rate against citizens. And it's actually tremendous. If you calculate it, it's around 150 deaths for every 100,000 cops per year. If you compare that to private, individual kill rates in the United States, it's like 30 times lower. So it's really unfortunate the amount of people who get killed in the United States by cops. So the idea that they're there to protect people, that's something we can question. The perspective put forth by Stringham is being reinforced by the efforts of Fatal Encounters, who have already documented over 18,000 people killed by U.S. police since 2000. Review the details, sign up for their emails, and donate to help their efforts at fatalencounters.org. The first step to change this situation is education. That's why Stringham's comments and the work of the Fatal Encounters team are cited here. As an aside, Stringham edited a superb book called Anarchy and the Law, The Political Economy of Choice. A collection of essays that present various viewpoints on issues of law, security, and protection. I found the content thought-provoking. More information about the book, which is included at copblog.org/library, can be found at Google Books, at Mises.org, and at Amazon.com. Watch Stringham's full Innercast interview,